Okay, should we just start?
Let's
I
just
have
go.
so much I want to talk to you about, but I know I want to do it all on here. So let's just go, okay? And first
Yeah,
of all, thank you, by the way, for
of course.
doing this.
Of course.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Hello, universe. A few years ago, my son said, Mommy, I want to live on a house on the ground. You see, at the time we lived in the city, high above the fog in San Francisco proper. Like many other urbanites, I thought moving to the suburbs would be the death of me and my identity as this culturally hip person. But also, as a very young mom, to me, moving to the suburbs was like accepting a minivan as your primary mode of transportation, a loss of my untethered youth. I was never, ever going to do that. So I thought. Well, destiny or just gray hair had something else in store for me. And that, my friends, was the suburbs. My life took on a new rhythm of school drop-offs, pickups, sports, activities, lessons, tutoring, playdates, doctor appointments, and everything in between. Like, starting and running a business as well. But punctuated in that suburban life rhythm was a haven of sorts, one where I could grab a good salad, a soup, an icy drink, but most importantly, cookies and good Wi-Fi. This place, my friend, is Panera Bread. A tiny part of me thinks maybe I owe some equity to Panera because of how much I used its cafe as a co-working space back in the day when I was building and thinking and juggling parenthood and businesses. Today, I'm chatting with Niren Chaudhary, CEO of Panera Bread. Here's what makes this story so interesting to me. Niren joined Panera in May of 2019, just 8 months before COVID-19 emerged in the US. And let me remind you, Panera has 2,119 actual bakery cafe locations across 48 states here in the US and in Canada. Thousands of employees as well, and the ensuing lockdowns, mandating closures. One could say Niren and the Panera team were in for a ride of a lifetime. I had CNBC on a few months into the pandemic and I saw Niren. I was so inspired to hear how Niren was leading his teams and navigating the rough waters of this pandemic strategically. But what stuck out for me at the core of his strategic decisions was just that there was so much humanity, compassion, and care. And I took notice. And while we'll get into all of this today and more, it was around that same time, like many of you, our family's Netflix queues were lit with recommendations from friends. We had all the space and time to finally discover new content. There was a film called The Sky is Pink with Priyanka Chopra that had all my mom text groups on fire. It is the most soulful and touching story. It had our family talking and thinking about the film for days and weeks after. In fact, the soundtrack apparently, according to my Spotify, it was the most listened to of all my tracks this past summer. Long after Niren agreed to come on the show, I discovered that it was actually Niren's family, and particularly his daughter Aisha's incredible story that was the inspiration behind the film. And it all started to click for me. Niren's lead from your heart management style is one that has been honed over the roughest of circumstances. His ability to lead his family, the Panera family, and others through this unprecedented time is one that not only galvanizes me to do better, but I'm positive it will do the same for you. So with that, hi, Niren.
Hello. Well, what an introduction.
Thank you.
You're actually, I have to say, a dream customer for Panera.
Well, I try to be. It's like it was made for me. It's so funny because as I was writing your intro, Niren, it is the first time I actually had to use the thesaurus to find another word other than inspiring, because that is literally the more and more I uncover about not only the stuff you have been doing at Panera, but just your life. Thus, the word galvanize, people, is a synonym to inspire, although I don't think it's the same word. There's so much I want to talk to you about today, but we're going to start with my favorite topic. Are you ready?
Sure, of course.
Food. Okay, people, Panera now has a flatbread pizza. So I don't know. I'm sorry, radio friends. This is why I keep telling you to go onto my YouTube channel, because you'd be able to see the half-eaten flatbread. So I have a couple of questions.
It
First
looks
of all,
firstly, I think that pizza looks stunningly beautiful.
Thank you. It is. It smells good. You know, I used to sell on the Home Shopping Network my products, and I used to say, I wish you could smell it. So people, I wish you could smell my pizza. But I have a question.
Yeah.
What is the difference between flatbread and pizza?
Hey, I think the origin of the product is such an interesting story. So as you mentioned, we were in the middle of the pandemic, and looking for ways to really start driving the business. It was very clear that the delivery was on fire. People were wanting to have their food delivered to their homes, and we felt that we didn't at Panera have a product which is like a family, warm, shareable, at-home meal solution. We are known for our sandwiches and soups and salads, and we didn't have that. So, and then on the other hand, I was intrigued to find that during the pandemic, one of the few foods that were doing very well were pizzas. Indulgent food and food. Burgers were doing well. Donuts were doing well. So customers during the lockdown were, looking for nostalgia, some indulgence, some comfort. So leveraging that insight, we said we've got to have a pizza because our customers want it and we don't have it. But we have to do it in a unique Panera way, and that's why a flatbread pizza is different from a pizza. And so let me tell you why. So we have, for example, the dough that we have. It's called the 00 flour. It's a highest quality flour that you can get. The ingredients are all fresh. They're clean. All our proteins are responsibly sourced. We have 2 blends of cheeses, Fontana and mozzarella, and of course, really fantastic sauces like chipotle sauce. And then finally, it is stone baked. So all of those 3 things make it almost like artisanal. I think when it comes to pizza, it is a poetry of pizza that comes to you from Panera, which is very unique.
You're like my son's dream right now, which I have to say, every tough moment in his life, he always asked for Panera's chicken noodle soup. But now that you have pizza, we did try that also a couple weeks ago, and he was like, now he just is a growing boy. So he has both. He like double fits. It's like the chicken noodle soup and the pizza. But you have his stamp of approval. And I really think a teenager boy stamp of approval of a flatbread is a good one, if you ask
Hey,
me.
by the way, have you tried the teriyaki chicken broccoli bowl?
But that looks good because you know what I'm obsessed with is the broccoli mac and cheese, which I have to say, I never thought I would like something like that. I am obsessed with the broccoli mac and cheese.
Good on you. You clearly have very refined tastes, and I think, like I said, you're a dream Panera customer.
Thank you. So, I know the restaurant business was sort of down, but did they hire you to come up with the jingle for the flatbread pizza? Is that what's going on?
You know what? I've always been an aspiring rock artist. I wanted to be part of a band. If I had to live my life all over again, I'd want to play music. So I think whenever I feel joyful and I get excited, I get inspired to write a song. So I think at Panera, there have been many moments. I've written a song on broccoli mac and cheese. I've written a song on coffee. And recently, you're right, I've written a song on flatbread pizza.
Can I ask you to play that for me while I eat?
I was hoping that you'll ask me to sing it for you, and I will.
Okay, let's go.
All right. 00 dough ingredients that are fresh. Messy abundance crafted by a chef. Chicken cheese margarita. Panera's got for you. Flatbread pizza. Flatbread pizza.
I mean, this is a first. I've actually had a female CEO accidentally announce her pregnancy on the show, but this is second to that, I would say. That's amazing. Well, Speaking of serenading, I was going to do this a little later, but this just seems like the perfect moment. First of all, I have to say, you definitely must have been a winner for the ladies back in India. And I heard that your wife, Aditi, really made you woo her. In fact, I don't know if this is true, but did I hear or read somewhere that you literally, like, what would be the equivalent here? Not valedictorian, but is it the second in your entire class just to impress your wife?
It is true. I think so. I met Aditi when she was 14. I was 16. It was love at first sight for me, not for her. Uh, I was.
Did you serenade? That would have just clucked. That would have done
Well,
the
I didn't. So I had. That's why I had to pull out all these tricks. I had to learn how to play the guitar. I started doing martial arts. I started studying hard just to sort of get her attention, and eventually it worked, and I got the girl. Um, but it is true. I think the first few years in school, everything that I did was to impress her, and she's my best friend. We've been married together for so many years, and she continues to inspire me.
I love that. I feel like that may be the exact advice. I need my son to fall in love. Maybe that is precisely what is needed for him to clean up his act, people. But to go back to Panera for a minute, you touched on a few things, and I think I mentioned this in my intro, but what you did during the pandemic was so, so, so inspiring to me. And you really just empowered your team. I'd love for you to talk about how, you had to furlough all these employees, but you did what you would never think your boss would do, which is find you another job.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has been tough for all of us. It's been an unprecedented year. And I think what has made the crisis particularly tough, I think, is because it's three crises into one: health, financial, humanitarian, and all of that sort of colliding at the same time. Um, and I think at moments like that, I really feel we as human beings, as leaders, as companies, as brands need to step up and do the right thing the right way. And I think apart from financial stewardship, which I think every company needed to do to protect their brand and business, and also to keep the safety of their associates and customers foremost in mind, I felt that we needed to do more. My team felt we needed to do more and help those who were impacted the most by the pandemic, and actually use this as an opportunity to build trust with our associates, our customers, and our community by going above and beyond, and realizing that even as we do tough things, we can do tough things with compassion and with humanity and with respect. So, the example that you gave, our associates, we had to make the tough calls: job eliminations, salary reductions. We had to furlough about 36,000 people, and that's not an easy thing to do. And therefore, we asked ourselves, what can we do to do that with compassion? And therefore, we reached out to CVS and Walmart and had an arrangement with them whereby they could employ our furloughed associates and then give them back to us once we were ready. We had we also did an arrangement with Deepak Chopra and Oprah Winfrey and had a wellness program for our associates. For our customers, we were always looking at, how can we solve their problems? We quickly recognized there was a problem with the non-availability of grocery items. So we set a grocery business up from scratch very quickly. And then on community, whether it was doctors, nurses, children, or families, we constantly were finding ways to serve them and make a difference to those who were impacted most by the pandemic. And I think, in a way, that spirit galvanized the organization, brought the team together, and gave us, a sense of pride that we were actually not just observing the pandemic, but actively participating and making a difference.
Yeah. The grocery thing, I have to say, see, I picked up my bread today. It's become a habit now to get bread in this way from Panera. As an entrepreneur, sometimes, especially being here in the Valley, we kind of just imagine these big companies like Panera to be slow pokes and like these big behemoths that don't move very fast. But I was so impressed when I heard that you had your grocery setup. What was it, like 10 days or something?
10 days. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what happened was, Panera, I think when you have a crisis, there's almost like a crisis like collaboration that happens within an organization. where teams come together because they know that survival is at stake, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that was certainly the case for us. And we have a very talented team that has always had a culture of fast moving innovation, but this was even like faster than anything that I could imagine. So we set up curbside pickup in 1,000 cafes in 7 days, including geofencing and free Wi-Fi outside the cafe. You talked about your cookie and Wi-Fi inside, so we got free Wi-Fi outside as well in these locations. And then grocery, that's right, in 10 days flat. You know, it happened that Aditi and I were sitting at home trying to order some grocery, and we were told to wait for 5 weeks. And I said, you know, we have such a huge amount of potential write-off risk with our inventory because of sales have plummeted. Our associates don't have jobs, and our customers are struggling to find high demand grocery items. So it's a perfect solution is let's set up a grocery business. And you know, within 10 days we set it up. And you know, I think that's just, I think it's an example of the mindset that we have at Panera, having this sense of dissatisfaction and this relentless pursuit to satisfy our customers better than anybody else.
Like me. Reluctant suburbanite. You know, in addition to that, I recently read that you started something, is it called Donation with Jose Andres, who I completely idolize for all the most amazing humanitarian work that he's done. I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
Sure, I think so. You know, we have Panera is a brand that has goodness in its DNA. It's kind of be good, do good, and make people around you feel good. You know, because we serve food that is good and also good for you. So that's at the very heart of who we are. And hence, I think we are always looking for ways to serve the communities and make a difference to those within the communities in which we serve. So we have a end of day donation program. I don't know if you knew about that, where we gift the unsold bakery products at the end of every single day, worth over $100 million to more than 4,000 nonprofit organizations every year. You know, we do that every single year, and that's kind of a one of our corporate programs that we do. But other than that, we're constantly looking for opportunities to partner with like-minded people like Jose, who's absolutely a legend in terms of, you know, how the difference that he makes and the passion with which he attacks suffering through food, you know. And we have a similar agenda that, you know, we want to actually address suffering and address hunger in some form or the other. So I think this was a perfect coming together, convergence of values of us wanting to do the same thing. And we converged around, you know, the goodness of eating and what makes great food great ingredients, great people, great values, and a desire to serve. So very happy about that partnership with them.
You know, what makes, I think, what you're saying and what Jose Andres does, for those that might not know him, is he's able to literally overnight, I don't know how he does this, set up food operations to feed people in a disaster area. And that's takes some entrepreneur skill. And what you're talking about, some of the other things that you did, like make this happen in 10 days, the grocery and the staples and all of that, also takes entrepreneurial skills, which, you know, it feels like, you know, someone who's been in a corporate setting for 30 years wouldn't have that capability, but you do. And I feel like it might have come from your time in India, because I read that you literally started Yum Brands out of nothing in India. Is that true? So you basically
Yes,
are an
yes.
entrepreneur. Can you talk about what that was like, and, you know, just that experience? That must have been crazy.
Yeah, I think I worked for 23 years with Yum, you know, an outstanding company with tremendous culture, great brands, global presence. And I was lucky to get different types of assignments. I've lived and worked in Europe. You know, I ran our Dutch business there. I picked up the language, so I speak Dutch. I
Wow.
ran the German business. I picked up some German, and I speak, you know, some German as well. And then went back to India, like you said, to start off all three brands from scratch. So imagine this opportunity: over 1 billion people in India, culturally very different, as you know, from the US. And you have these iconic brands, Pizza Hut, KFC, Taco Bell, and you have to start them off from scratch. So like, how do you do that? How do you make a global brand resonate in India with a local heart, where the culture is so different? How do you make that brand relevant and accessible to a market which is huge but very, very different, and
Right.
yet keep it global, and do that not once but in three different brands? And I think that was a fascinating journey for me. And it comes down to always really understanding the cultural context of who you're serving, what's important to them, really understanding that, and adapting the relevance of your brand for the customers that you're serving, and making sure your brand is accessible to them, and then building an outstanding team and culture to execute that. But some interesting examples, I think, because India is some of the pivots we had to make. So Kentucky Fried Chicken, all right, in a country which is 60% vegetarian, and even the non-vegetarian turn veg for 3 months in a year, it's a nightmare for a guy trying to set up a KFC business. So how do you sort of still drive relevance? So we came up with the vegetarian Zinger sandwich,
Ah,
which was had all the attributes of KFC. So crunchy on the outside, spicy on the inside. Came up with a secret recipe for that vegetarian Zinger sandwich. And when we launched it, customers sort of understood. They said, okay, it was cottage cheese as the main protein. um, or on Pizza Hut. Interestingly, on Pizza Hut, customers felt that pizza is a snack. You know, if you grow up in Mumbai or Delhi, you know that pizza is seen as a snack. It's not a meal. You can't sort of meal has to be rice and staples.
yeah.
So we had a hard time trying to convince customers that, hey, this is actually a meal. You can replace your meal with pizza. It has flour, it has cheese and vegetables. So we came up with a product called biritza, which was like the goodness of a biryani, and it was covered on top with a pan pizza layer. So, and it had a nice, interesting arrabbiata sauce on the side. So you would peel off the pan pizza, dip it in the sauce, eat it, and then grab some of that biryani as well. So that
Ah,
was like a biritza. So to make that linkage between mealness occasion and a bridge product, for Pizza Hut. And at the third, on Taco Bell, I think interestingly, as you know, in India, nobody understands tacos. Like, yeah,
yeah.
they understand what a bell is in isolation, but not Taco Bell. And Mexican food, the concept is not understood. So we had to create a linkage. We came up with a product which was a combination of a kathi roll, which is
Yes.
like a
A
food roll in
burrito,
India. Yeah, like
kind
a
of,
burrito.
right?
So
Yeah.
kathi roll and a burrito, a
Yeah.
combination, and we came up with what we called a kathi toe, which was the goodness of a kathi inside a burrito. So again, the customers could relate to it and understand it. So I think all about how do you drive relevance, how do you drive accessibility. It is a fascinating journey. I really one that I enjoyed immensely.
So many people, especially here in the Valley, they talk about building the ecosystem now in India, the bridge. Like, it's almost like I literally have friends who are in their homes in Palo Alto running businesses worth billions of dollars in India, sitting in Palo Alto because that market is so important to them.
Yeah.
What sort of, I mean, but you saw India change firsthand because you were operating. I mean, what sort of things have you noticed? Like, what can you share about that time and where you see India today in terms of opportunity?
I think India is an incredible place to do business in terms of opportunity. I think
Yeah.
by 2030, India probably will be the biggest consumer market or amongst the top two consumer markets in the world. That's just a mathematical certainty, right? So any global company that wants to be successful has to have its eye on India strategy. So I think it's a very important country. I think, as you also know, we have more than 600 million people under the age of 30. That's like combining the population of Europe and the US and ring fencing them in a country called India, and they're all under the age of 30. And that's incredible. And when
Mm-hmm.
you have a young population of that magnitude of 600 million people, then there's a lot of desire for aspirational, a better life, better brands, more consumption, which will then, of course, fuel the market. And I think the overarching just stats in terms of number of people in the working population, number of people migrating to urban India, etc., All of that taken together means that India is going to be an explosive place to do business in the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I have to ask, what's with Yum Brands creating like the most amazing South Asian leaders? We had Ann Mukherjee on, who was at Yum Brands. We have who's now CEO of Pernod Ricard. She was on the show. We had Milind Pant, who's CEO of Amway, who was also at Yum Brands. Like, what was happening at Yum Brands? I feel like it was a tiny incubator to become like super successful CEOs.
So I think Yum Brands is an incredible company. I think it was founded and led by my dear friend and mentor, David Novak, um, who is just an incredible leader uh, and a builder of talent. I think he was a talent magnet. He attracted great people. He built a culture where he nurtured those people and grew them into leaders, gave them a lot of opportunities. Like, like a person like me to be able to go to Europe, different markets, different cultures, get different opportunities is just phenomenal and doesn't happen, in every company. So I think I owe a huge deal to Yum Brands. And I think it's like a university, you're right. It's a university of exceptional leaders. And I know Milind very well. He and I work together in India. But apart from us, there are so many people
Yeah.
who are running companies, across the globe. And Yum is like an incredible university of talent.
You know, I think like, obviously my audience knows my parents are from India, but I'm born and raised in the US. And I have to say that one of sort of the shortcomings, I think, of being sort of born and raised here was that it took me a while to have a more global perspective. It was always America first, America first. We were satisfied with the American market. And now more than ever, I think everybody knows that the global market is very, very interesting. I mean, just what you were saying about India, but to hear that you so fluidly, I mean, Milind talked about this too when I had him on, we're able to sort of go to these different markets. Like, what is that mindset? How are you so flexible? Like, talk to me about that. Teach people like me. Like,
I think that's a great question, because I've lived and worked in multiple countries in the UK, in Netherlands, in Germany. And then I was living, working in Dallas, and then back in India, and now in Boston. Um, what I've really learned is that people are the same wherever you go.
yeah.
There's an innate goodness in people. I feel that people all want the same thing. They're motivated by the same things. They want respect. They want recognition. They want love. They want compassion. They want meaning. They want purpose. They want to do good. You know. Um, so there is more in common than not in common across different cultures at the level of just being human beings. However, there are stylistic differences in every culture, which is very important to be sensitive to and to adapt to as the leader. I really believe that the onus is on the person coming in to the culture to adapt to the culture and not the other way around. So if I go to Netherlands, I have to learn the language. I have to understand how business gets done and what is okay and not okay, not the other way around. If I go to Germany, I can't apply the same playbook as I had in Netherlands. I have to relearn what is it that makes that culture tick. I have to learn the language. I have to understand the people. And I think that's what I've learned, that if you go in with an open mind and a desire and an open heart and a desire to learn and to understand and to connect with people at a human level and cut past the external differences of language and appearances, and you're able to connect human to human, you can work anywhere. But to be able to do that, the mindset has to be that I have to change, I have to adapt,
Yep.
and I think I am here in this environment. I have to learn, and I have to lead people the way they want to be led. You know, I think that's. So I'll give you a few examples. Like in Netherlands, it's a very egalitarian society, and everybody has a point of view. And people like to be consulted. At least my team, and you would lead through consensus. So you'd ask people, "What do you think?" and then arrive at a consensus. You try that in Germany, and there's no there's no way that you can progress, because there they want role clarity. You are the leader. You have to clearly define what needs to be done, and then people will execute. It's not so much around consensus building. So these are some important nuances and differences that you have to have a high sort of an IQ for, able to understand it, and then more importantly, this commitment that I must adapt to belong. I must adapt. The change begins with me, as a leader. And I feel whenever you do that, people respect you. And when they respect you and they start trusting you, then you can start having an impact.
Can we get more granular on that? Because I think this is like for someone who's maybe thinking, I have a friend who's like me, born and raised here, but of Indian origin, and moved to Berlin to start an incubator. Okay. So for someone like that, or someone who just wants to take a post in a different country, like, how do you learn? Are you asking people you work with? How, like, what are your tips and tricks? Like, how do you immerse yourself in a culture in a way that's so nuanced, like what you're saying? Are you just asking outright, or how are you learning?
So the way you're learning is that firstly, coming in with this mindset of I must adapt.
Yeah.
That mindset is very important, you
Okay.
know, and I must learn and I must look for cues, social cues, culture cues, conversational cues. Um, if possible, learn the language, because I think the language is very often, um, I think, the point of connection with people. So the language, even if you don't speak it very well, I think if you make the attempt to try and learn it through language, suddenly this world, which feels alien, starts making sense because the conversations in the trams, in the trains, in the bus, on the street, in your restaurants, you start understanding and you start connecting the dots. You start understanding people. You start understanding nuances. So I think I would say language. I would say this intent, and then I think just like making mistakes and being good natured about it and kind of learning from it. So I'll give you an example. I used to drive on the highway from, I was looking after Netherlands and Germany. And Netherlands, my team was very spontaneous. I would just, because I had 2 hours on the Autobahn, I would just call them for a chat. And they were fine with it. My German team, I tried doing the same thing, just call them on the Autobahn. I have like 2 hours, let's just call them for a chat. And I'd hear some icy silence on the other side. And I say, did we have an appointment to have a chat? You know,
Yeah.
are you assuming I'm just sitting here doing nothing? You know, like can we organize our time a little bit better? So we'd have a good laugh over that, and then I would say, yeah, that's absolutely right. I have to be more respectful of the way in which people want to work. So I think it's this iterative process, a mindset, language, immersion, um, all of that taken together. I think helps you sort of get to the other side.
Yeah. I think that's like so helpful. Where do you feel like this? I mean, were you always this ambitious, or did something happen? Like, were you, when you were in India? I mean, obviously you did super well in school. And yes, I know it was driven by love, and love makes us do crazy things, people. But were you always thinking like, I want to travel the world? I mean, was that something you visualized for yourself?
Yeah, and I think I just want to tell you another story on culture, which in an English-speaking country like, say, the US, when I came here, because
Yeah.
I think it's easier to understand in Germany and Holland. So funny thing, I come to Boston, and I'm, super nervous about Panera. It's such an incredible brand, and the first outsider CEO, um, and I have to walk up and give my first talk to about 1,000 people in St. Louis.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so I'm walking up and I'm feeling nervous, and the 1,000 people are, assembled, and they want to listen to this new guy. Um, so somebody, that my CFO behind me, said, "Are you nervous?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Don't worry, they're in a good mood. The Blues won last night."
Ah.
So I didn't know what blues was. I said, okay, so it's stuck in my head. So I walked up on stage and I said, I'm feeling a bit nervous, but I hear that you're in a good mood because the Blues won last night. And the crowd erupted and they cheered and they said, "Wow, this is incredible." So I said, "Wow." I said, thankfully nobody asked me what blues was. I didn't know much beyond the color of, what blues was. Now, the funny thing is I go to Boston where we have our head office and I try the same trick. I go there and I say, "I believe the Blues won this week." And it was like stony silence. And somebody came to me and said, "It's the Bruins, not the Blues." So I think, just I think always sort of understanding, trying to get into the culture and connecting with people. I think it's like such a fun journey. Yeah. So to your question about global ambition, I think I always had that. You know, um, I felt that I wanted to be amongst the brightest and the best across the world and push myself to the limit so that I can truly be the best version of myself. My purpose is to inspire myself and those around me to be the best version of ourselves every single day. That's what kind of really drives me. And I felt that I must raise my ambition to a global playing field where I learn from the very best out there and get pushed. And that's how I think I'll become the best version of myself. Yes, it was always something that I aspired to do.
Speaking of being the best version of yourself, I think it's a perfect place to bring in Aisha because um, for my audience, she died at 18 years old in 2015 of pulmonary fibrosis and left an incredible body of work. You need to Google this, people. So let me say, first of all, your family's so generous for sharing this story with the world because it touched me in a really deep way. And we talk a lot about leadership, on this show. And she was an inspiring leader herself. She has this TED Talk. Everyone, again, Google it. It's got millions of views. You like literally won't be the same after you watch this TED Talk. And she has this book called My Little Epiphanies, which I forgot. It's on my nightstand, but there's many pieces from there, but there's one on my post-it I'm going to read that says, if you can't change your own life, there's always someone else's. And like that just got me in such a big way. And I think that's why I work so hard to share these stories in that sort of attempt. So let's talk about your daughter. I don't really even know where to start because she clearly touched me. And I'm just so beyond grateful that you work to put this movie out there and continue to share her story.
Yeah, I think Aisha was and is truly special. I think she has been my biggest inspiration by far. Uh, and like you said, she died very young. She was just 18. She died of pulmonary fibrosis, which is a progressive hardening of the lung. But Aisha's story is not about uh, why somebody died so young. It's about how did she live her life the way she did. How did she end up lighting up the skies? How did she achieve so much in such little time? And as you said, she's got TED Talks, she's written a book, there's a movie inspired by her. And I think it was all down to just her attitude. And the attitude was, she did a self-portrait of hers, and on that self-portrait, she wrote these words, which I think capture her attitude better than anything else I can say. That it said on her self-portrait, "We are here to laugh at the odds and live life so well that death will tremble to take us." You know, and tremble it did. When it came to take Aisha. Such was the intensity of purpose of I'm here. I will make every single day count. I will make every moment magical. Um, so I think there are a couple of things about her that really inspire me that I want to share with the listeners. I think one is around courage, and as she writes in her book My Little Epiphanies, pick the highest mountain to climb on and the dullest of days to shine on. Meaning that when you're not really feeling that great or things are not going well, pick a mountain. Pick a mountain, do your very best to get on top. And once you get on top, pick another mountain and do your very best to get on top by focusing always on what you have control over, not on what's happening to you. And I remind myself of that infinite number of times every single day. I think the second thing that I loved about Aisha was her sense of gratitude. Right till the very end, as she lay dying in her bed and her body wasting away, she would say, "I must remind myself to be grateful that I can still smile. I can hear my mother's laughter." You know, um, and 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 I think there's such a powerful message that we can discover everyday miracles around us through the lens of gratitude. If at night before we sleep, we just use the lens of gratitude and say, you know, what is going right in my life? And you'll suddenly find there's so much that is going right. We just somehow don't take the time to acknowledge it. And I think just having that lens of gratitude, you'll discover that there are miracles happening to us all the time. And then finally, this thing of, if you can't change your own life, there's always someone else's. This, I think, the power of giving, is so powerful. And as Aditi and I searched for a direction and purpose, we keep coming back to that and saying, okay, what can we do to make a difference in the lives of others? I actually leverage my work and my relationships at work to do that, to make a difference, to create a company that reflects the world that I want to see, you know, and also specific projects in Aisha's memory. We have, so Aisha passed away because she couldn't find a bone marrow donor. And now we have a Indian, because in India, you could not get a bone marrow donor. So now we have an India chapter called DKMS // Aisha, which is the bone marrow registry, one of the biggest in the world, that has now opened an Indian chapter to honor Aisha and her memory. So all the listeners, if you know people in India, or even if you don't, you can go to DKMS in the US and you can register to become a bone marrow donor. And who knows, you may end up saving a life. And I think there's nothing more meaningful than that.
That's interesting. You should bring that up. But when I was in college, there was some sort of South Asian conference, but really it was just one big party. And one of the good things that came out is they had a bone marrow drive. So a bunch of us friends registered. And just 2 days ago, one of my friends, he was a match for somebody. And so I encourage every single one of you to take this so seriously. It's super easy to do. And it's incredible what a huge impact you can have on somebody's life. So I think that's incredible. Um, in researching you, there's an anecdote I heard when you were on David Novak's podcast. Actually, you shared this of how he came to your house after Aisha had passed. And you know what I took away, which I'd like for you to tell that story, but what I took away from that is like, it's not about just professional success, but just like being a human being. Like solving for happy isn't just like padding your bank account, which people, I know we need money to survive, but also just like being a human being. So I'd love for you to share that story because I really see seeds of what you subsequently are doing with Panera and this time. Like I can see all these seeds as like someone on the outside looking in.
Yeah. I think if I ask all the listeners right now to think of who inspires them the most, and why is that? I'm sure that it will not be intellect, it will be heart. We don't get inspired by how smart people are. I think like we get inspired by how good people are. I think it's humanity that inspires us. And whenever somebody shows compassion, empathy, love, caring, I think that's certainly what resonates with me and inspires me. And when I have received it, I have made, a note of it and I said, okay, I must remember how this makes me feel.
Mm.
And I must pass that forward. I must pour that into other people because of how it makes me feel. It makes me feel respected, recognized, validated as a human being. And that our relationship, even at work, is just not a transactional relationship. It is a genuine human relationship that means something. And I think David Novak, who I mentioned to you, is one of my closest friends and has been my mentor for over 20 years. I think, when Aisha passed away in 2015, I was so crushed by it. And the doorbell rings. I'm in India. David's in the US in Louisville. And the doorbell rings. I open it, and David is standing there, David Novak. And he's turns out, taken 3 commercial flights, for a man who doesn't take commercial flights. And he just wanted to be there. And he came and we hugged and we cried. And he said, I just wanted to be here with you. And that's it. He hugged me. And the next morning, he took those 3 flights and he went back. It meant the world to me. It meant that I was just not another employee. It meant I was a human being that David cared for, and that then just deepens my commitment to David and leaders like that I would do anything for them. So I think there's a great leadership lesson here, which is real inspiration is about having people do things for you because they want to do it. They want to do it,
Yeah.
not because you're asking them to do it. They want to do it, and to get people to feel that way, they can do that only if you have a deep human connection. You know, and if you lead with your heart.
You know, bad things happen to people you work with. And I think sometimes people lack of actions or acknowledging it isn't that they don't want to. They don't know what to do. They don't have experience. This isn't something you can really Google. And teach us what can we do? What is the right thing to do in a situation when something bad happens to somebody, that we know, and we want to be there and we want to acknowledge it?
I think when something bad happens, I think you're right. We sometimes are conflicted. We don't know how to behave. We don't know what to say, and very often then maybe sometimes stay away because
Exactly.
we don't want to inadvertently upset somebody. Um, I feel having sort of been in that situation where other people needed to do that for me. I think what meant most to me was when people didn't have to say anything; they just had to be there. You know,
Yeah.
I don't think you have to search for any words. I think just being there and just um, in a way that only a friend can, in your most authentic way, is more than enough. I think we should never feel compelled that we have to somehow make it right, because none of us can make something that is that dramatic right. I think it all requires time. But I think it is very comforting to just know that people care for you and they feel for you.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And, when I look at the numbers of what's been happening with COVID, and now there's been this like unleashing of leadership with humanity and heart, we start to learn things about our coworkers. Maybe someone's going through failed IVF, just things that are just hard. And so I personally think when you can show up as your whole self, you just do better. I'm not just talking
Yeah.
about productivity. It's just you do better.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. But in the movie The Sky is Pink, there's this part, I rewatched it again last night, and there's this part that I didn't quite catch the first time, where so Aisha narrates the story, and out pops Priyanka Chopra, and I imagine your wife Aditi, out of a beautiful home in London with this amazing outfit. And Aisha says, "Oh, Moose," who she refers to her mom as Moose, bet on the right horse because my dad made it. And as an entrepreneur and someone who loves hip hop, which most of the themes on hip hop is I started down here and now I'm here, there are a lot of listeners, Niren, who are listening and consuming and looking to you because they don't feel that they've quote unquote made it yet. So, two things. Number one, maybe this goes second, but what is success and wealth really mean to you? I think it's important to hear that. And number two, but yeah, money is important. Like Phil Knight has this book called Shoe Dogs, which I don't know if you've read,
I
but
have. Yeah.
incredible book, everyone. I feel like I talk about, like, they should pay me because I'm sure I'm like, but there's this part in there that honestly changed my perspective on money, which Phil Knight says that money is something that, like, it's like blood. You need it to survive, but you shouldn't be thinking about it all the time. Okay. So talk to me about that, because that moment in that movie, the reason why that's so important is because financially you didn't have the means to do all the things you wanted to do early on. So obviously financial success is important for so many reasons. So talk to me about all of that.
Sure. So I think what I would like to share is that, first off, think of your life sort of from a future back perspective. Fast forward 10 years from now and think about the kind of life that you want to lead. I think the metaphor of like a painting, like your life is a painting, and what is the kind of painting that you want to see 10 years from now? In terms of where are you living, what are you wearing, what kind of job are you doing, who are you living with, how are you feeling? And it may be vague, but think about it, because I really believe that everything in this world is created twice, first in your mind and then in reality. And
Mm.
very often we don't begin with the end in mind, we just keep living life, and then one day, boom, it's over. you know and you say, oh my god, this is not a dress rehearsal, this is the real thing. And I don't like where I have landed. How did I get here? Suddenly you wake up and you say, what happened to me? So we don't want that. So I think just stopping first and saying, where do I want to go, what am I trying to do, and having a end in mind is, I think, very important. So to have the audacity to dream, you
Mm.
know to dream, and to dream, and actually to write it down, and to visualize it and remind yourself of that, I think is very, very important. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is to be able to achieve that dream. One has to say, okay, it has to be innately curious. Okay, how have other people done it? You know, Phil Knight and others, and so many people who've already walked that road before. What was so different about what they did, and how can I learn from that? How can I learn from what I have been through? And how can I relearn some other skills and unlearn what is not useful? So learning and curiosity is the second thing around, I think that's such an important attribute. This almost sort of childlike, you know, hunger to learn and be curious. So begin with the end in mind, and then have this childlike curiosity. Um, I feel the third important thing is, and this is very important, to be successful. I think as a leader, you need both competence but also character. I
Mm.
think everybody knows about competence. Everybody knows you have to become good at skilled at what you need to do. But I don't think we pay quite the same amount of attention to character, which is about who am I? What do I stand for? What do I believe in? How do I want to show up? Because I think leadership is all about establishing trust, and trust is about consistent behavior. Consistent behavior is about clarity of values. So I think those three things are important. So you visualize where you want to go, you have curiosity, and you strengthen your character. I think the financial success, I'll tell you, for me, um, personally, it, it it was a couple of failures that deepened my resolve. So when I lost my first daughter, Tanya, I didn't have the financial means to take care of her medical care. And I can't tell you how desperate I felt as a father. And then when I lost, or was about to lose Aisha, when she had to have the bone marrow transplant and we had to raise money in the UK, I again didn't have money. And I had such a desperate feeling in the pit of my stomach that as a father, I was a failure because I was not financially able to take care of my family. And that really deepened my resolve that I don't want to ever be in a situation where I'm not financially independent and I cannot look after my family. That would be the biggest failure. So to me, money is important, but more in the form of, a means to an end so that you can take care of your family. And finally, I think what drives me in my career is, it's about being focused on what you're putting in and not worrying about the outcome, and being very sort of intentional about the purity of intent. And therefore, I am really driven by being the best version, learning, and having the most powerful impact that I can potentially create. Because the only thing in my control is what I put in. What actually happens is kind of some ways beyond my control. So I'm inspired when I have an assignment where I can learn, I can have an impact, and that makes me do more impactful things, make a difference. And then I have been fortunate to be in situations where I've gotten different opportunities and continue to grow.
I'm going to go back to the money point for a minute because in the movie, I really I felt you. And I don't know why I felt it more the second time because I already knew what was coming, but I felt it. And it reminds me of many entrepreneur stories. In fact, I have friends who are like, I don't know if I can make payroll or whatever. Like they're in a really not so great situation. And with the pandemic, there's definitely a lot of people in a tumultuous financial situation. Like, Do you remember what that was like? And what I mean is like the steps that you took, like,
Sure.
like some
So,
actual tactical steps.
so I think for all the listeners who may not have seen the movie, which by the way you must see, The Sky
Yeah.
is Pink.
Good.
This is the situation. So my daughter is 8 months old. She requires a bone marrow transplant. I'm living in India. I have to take her to the UK for the bone marrow transplant. Bone marrow transplant costs 150,000 pounds. I have only 2,000 pounds. I have to raise 150,000 pounds in 2 weeks. If I don't, she will die, and she would be the second daughter that I would have lost. And that was the context. So I'm in the UK. I don't have friends. I don't have family. I don't know anybody. And it's a country that's not my own, and I have to raise 150,000 pounds in about 2 weeks time. So the first thing I did was I reminded myself to not be the victim,
Mm,
uh, to take control and spend all my energy on focusing on what I can do, and remind myself that, as a father, it was my responsibility to save my child, and this was not a time for me to indulge in pity and and feel bad about myself. I had to actually step up, and get my stuff together. So I went to the High Commissioner of India, the Indian Embassy in the UK, and I asked him. I said, "Give me a list of all the rich Asians in London." And I said, "Can you help me?" And he said, "I can't help you because they had limitations." But he was kind enough to connect me or give me a list of all the rich Asians. I started calling them one by one. You know, Suraj Paul and many others, prominent Indians. And sometimes if your intent is good, the right doors open. And I felt that every phone call I made, people said, "Okay, if you can prove this to me, here's 5,000, 10,000, etc." And people were just committing funds over the phone. I still knew that it was nowhere near enough. I was still way short, and I knew this would not get me to where I wanted to go. And again, same thing. Okay, what else can I be doing? Who else can I speak to? So I took out my address book and started calling all my friends. Do you know anybody? And uh, it all led me to a person called Avtar Lit, who owned Sunrise Radio. A friend of mine connected me to him. I went to see him, and I just poured my heart out as a father, and I said how much I needed in radio appeal. And I said, I don't know how to do this, but can you please do this for me? And again, he was kind enough to agree. The radio appeal happened, and it just exploded. I mean, in 5 days we had 250,000 pounds, far more than what we needed. We had to then appeal for people to stop sending money, and all of that was given to the hospital. But I think, to me, what I realized was the importance of focusing on what you can do.
mm,
And if the intent is good, keep knocking on doors, and something will open. Something
yeah.
will work. It's the same old adage about don't give up, etc. But I think it's about, I think, finding I find emotional energy in difficult situations to remind myself to focus on what I can do and take action, you know, and not just sit there and worry about things. Like, what am I going to do? Make a
Yeah.
list, and get after it.
Yeah. I think that piece about finding emotional energy is so important. And sometimes if you feel like you can't even make that phone call or write that email, one of the things that I do love about content and the internet and Google is that you can Google a lot to kind of like get you in that right sort of frequency. I've been asking a lot of my guests, I call this segment CEO Binge Club, because it used to just be like, what are the books that you sort of recommend or made a mark on your journey? But you know, more times than not, people would say, well, wait, I just watched this on Netflix or what have you. So, my question to you, or what is the content that gives you emotional energy or made a mark in your life?
So I love reading.
Yeah.
I love, and I have multiple books on the go at the same time. So I have my Kindle, and I've got, I love reading multiple books. So I think some recently that have really sort of impacted me. Adam Grant's book, I think it's called Think Again. Scott Galloway's book on post-COVID. I think those are two exceptional books. I found them like absolutely riveting, really well written and some really great content there. So those really stand out. I also listen frequently to podcasts, when I go for a run or go for a walk or I'm multitasking. Uh, and those podcasts are on news. So I like Axios Daily, which I love listening to. On leadership, How Leaders Lead, David Novak is an excellent podcast. He does a fantastic job interviewing people. I think Pivot by Scott Galloway, another very, very good one. Uh, Business Wars is another one, which is fascinating. So I think I like these business related podcasts. Um, so yeah, those are some of the, and then I think I don't know if you've come across book summaries and apps like Get Abstract
Yeah.
and Blinkist. I'm a big one on those. I love kind of just going very quickly through books, and if they catch my attention, then I go and get the real book and have a look at it. I would say um, one of the most powerful habits that any leader or aspiring leader can develop is to read and read and read and read and then read some more.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. What's the best advice you ever got?
Best advice I ever got. That's a good one. I think this is to be a lifelong learner. Um, that if you are a lifelong learner and you're smart enough to know that you're not smart, then you always stay grounded, and everything else I think falls in place because you listen more, you want to understand people more, you get better, and I think you have greater impact. So I was saying being a lifelong learner is probably the best advice I ever got.
The best advice I heard lately was one that came from you. It was about windmills. Can you share that analogy? And
Yeah. So I think this happened, this was the pandemic, and I was reflecting on uh, so Panera, the Cliff Note version has come out stronger through the pandemic. We were
yeah.
like we were negative 50 when it began, and now we're kind of positive territory. So we've recovered the business almost entirely. We've pivoted more to off-premise and more e-commerce, etc. And I think that has happened. And I was reflecting on the lessons and what can one draw from that. So one is of course about resilience, which is focus on what you can do, and we talked about that. I think the second one is about compassion. We talked about that. Like you can do tough things, but you do it with heart. And the third one is this metaphor of windmills, and I absolutely love that, which is when there is a storm that is raging around you, step back and harness the fury of the storm by building a windmill and not jump into the nearest bunker and wait for the storm to pass.
Yeah.
And that attitude of, okay, how can I find opportunity in any adversity? How can I step back and how might I actually convert this into a force multiplier for good and impact? So several examples here. I think we talked about some of those on the associate side, on customers. I think on the community, for example, um, I was sitting one day and looking at the food banks and these long line of cars and this sad headline that food banks are running out of food, right? So you ask yourself, okay, how can I make an impact? How might I have a windmill here that I make a difference? So we started a program called Together Without Hunger, and we just went and pledged, and we said we're going to serve 500,000 American families. We had no idea how we were going to do it, and in the middle of us trying to protect our cash, etc., it sounded quite counterintuitive. But we said, we have to find this windmill of opportunity to make a difference. So we went and actually made this pledge, Together Without Hunger, and we had this campaign called See a Plate, Fill a Plate. We engaged a lot of people, we raised a lot of money, and finally we made good on that promise of serving 500,000 people meals with Feeding America. So another example of this mindset of constantly looking for opportunities in adversity.
We're gonna end on a sweet note because I bet everyone asks you what your favorite thing at Panera is. And I already know because I already Google stalked all your interviews. So that's boring to me. But what I'd like to know which is my favorite thing at Panera, which is the cookies. And I got extra for my husband and my son, Krish. But what is your favorite cookie at Panera?
The kitchen sink cookie
Mm,
is
I knew we were
is
kindred spirits. That's
that's right.
like I like the saltiness. This cookie has salt on it. So it's like if
Yeah.
you can't decide whether you want to eat a potato chip or a cookie, this is like amazing, wouldn't you say?
It's outstanding. But I have to tell you on Panera, and this is I'm not joking here. I can eat Panera 3 times a day, 7 days a week, and never tire of it. I
Wow.
have this in the last. It's a bit embarrassing, but in the last maybe 3 months, I've been eating the same sandwich and the same salad every single day for lunch. It's the roasted turkey avocado BLT and the barbecue chicken salad. I have it every single day,
You're
because
like
it's
a man of routine.
actually, I'm not. I love to experiment, but here, this is like when you
Routine is
find sort of magic. This is like it's the best meal for me at Panera. So it's a fantastic brand, and it's a real privilege to be part of this team at Panera.
It's such a privilege to get the opportunity to talk to you and have your story go out into the world. And, I said this enough. I'm so inspired by just who you are as like a person and how you sort of harness the wind to create a style of leadership and management and sharing those stories in such an open way. I think the effects are yet to come of that. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed our chat.
It's a wrap. Thank you so much. I meant it.